The morning after my father died, I showed up at his house with the same keys I had used for years, and they no longer worked. I stood there in the Phoenix heat, holding a hospital wristband I had not taken off yet, while my sister texted me that I was not welcome anymore. A moving truck was parked 2 houses down, engine still running. I did not argue. I just walked away, because I knew if I stayed calm long enough, everything they believed was already finished. The morning after my father died, I stood in front of his house at exactly 7:18 a.m. because the sun in Phoenix comes up early and I had not slept anyway. I remember the time because I checked my phone while I was waiting for the lock to turn, the same habit I had when I used to come here before work. Same keys, same porch, same chipped blue paint on the doorframe, but the key did not move. I tried again, slower this time, pressing my thumb harder into the metal as if pressure could change reality. Nothing. I stepped back and looked at the door, confused in a quiet, practical way. The deadbolt was new, silver instead of brass, clean, no scratches yet. Someone had replaced it very recently, probably within the last few hours. I stood there with my overnight bag on my shoulder, my shoes still dusty from the hospital parking lot, and the thin plastic wristband from County General still wrapped around my left arm. I had meant to cut it off in the shower, but I never made it home. My phone buzzed in my hand. "Brooke, you should not be there. Diane is upset. Please leave." No hello. No I am sorry. Just that. I looked down at the wristband again. My name was printed in faded black ink, slightly smeared from sweat. Harper Lane, admitted 2 nights ago. Emergency stroke. Next of kin contact written in my handwriting. I had slept sitting up in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights, listening to machines breathe for my father while my sister was, apparently, shopping for locks. A pickup truck drove past slowly. Somewhere down the street, a garage door opened and closed. The neighborhood was waking up like nothing had happened. I could smell hot gravel and irrigation water. Normal morning smells. I took my bag off my shoulder and set it down by my feet. I did not knock. I did not ring the bell. I already knew what would happen if I did. Another buzz. "Brooke, we will talk later. Please do not make a scene." I smiled at that, just a little. My father was still in the hospital morgue, and somehow I was already the problem. 2 houses down, a white moving truck was parked at the curb. The back door was open. The engine was running. A man I did not recognize stood beside it, scrolling on his phone, wearing a baseball cap and gloves. There was a sofa inside the truck, half strapped, half loose. It took my brain a few seconds to register what I was seeing, because I was very tired and because part of me refused to connect the dots that quickly. My father had been dead for less than 12 hours. I picked up my bag and walked back to my car. I did not slam anything. I did not cry. I did not text back. I sat in the driver's seat for a full minute with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing in and out through my nose like I was preparing for a long ultrasound scan on an uncooperative patient. Slow, steady, professional. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of the porch in the rearview mirror. The small wooden bench my father used to sit on in the evenings was gone. In its place was a stack of flattened cardboard boxes, tied with twine. That was when I understood that this was not grief-talking. This was logistics. I drove to my apartment, a 1-bedroom rental near the hospital that I had chosen because it was quiet and cheap and nothing like my childhood home. I dropped my bag by the door and finally cut the wristband off with kitchen scissors. The plastic snapped cleanly, louder than I expected. I left it on the counter instead of throwing it away. In the shower, the hot water stung my shoulders, and I let it. I kept my eyes open the entire time. I did not want to think about my father yet. I wanted to think about locks and trucks and timing. By the time I was dressed, my phone had 7 missed calls from Brooke and 2 from an unknown number. I ignored all of them and made coffee. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I had always thought that if my father died, I would fall apart in some dramatic way. Instead, I was very clear-headed. At Neo, 2 a.m. I drove back to the neighborhood, but I parked a block away this time. I walked, slowly, like someone who belonged there. The moving truck was still there. 2 men were now carrying boxes out of the house. They moved carefully, like people who had been told to treat things as valuable but not personal. One of the boxes split open slightly at the bottom as they set it down. A stack of manila folders slid halfway out. I recognized my father's handwriting on the tabs. Dates, names. Notes he never trusted computers with. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Brooke came out onto the porch just then. She was wearing sunglasses and holding her phone to her ear. She did not see me. She laughed at something the person on the other end said. A light, easy sound that did not belong to this morning. "I told you I handled it," she said. "Everything is signed." Signed. The word landed heavily, like a dropped tool. She turned, finally noticed me, and froze. The laugh disappeared from her face as if someone had flipped a switch. She ended the call and walked toward me, stopping just short of the sidewalk. "You should not be here," she said again, this time out loud. "Diane cannot deal with you right now." I looked past her, into the house. The living room was bare except for the rug, rolled halfway, like someone had changed their mind about it. The walls looked bigger without furniture, empty. "What did you sign?" I asked. Brooke's jaw tightened. "This is not the time." "When was the time?" I asked, because I was at the hospital when he stopped breathing. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You were never on the paperwork. Dad made that clear." I did not answer. I was staring at her hands. She was holding a folder, pale blue, a color my father hated because it reminded him of office buildings. The corner was bent, like it had been carried around all morning. Behind her, the front door stood open. I could see the hallway that led to the garage. The garage where my father kept his tools, his records, his habits. I thought of the metal toolbox he never let anyone touch, the one with the dented corner and the old lock. Brooke followed my gaze and shifted her body slightly, blocking the view. "You need to leave," she said. "If you do not, I will call the police." That was when I realized how far she was willing to go. I nodded. Once, slowly. "Okay." She blinked, surprised. She had expected a fight. Everyone always did. I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I did not take a picture. I did not raise my voice. I got into my car and drove off, counting stop signs and speed bumps like it was any other day. But as I drove, I made one decision very clearly. I would not break into that house. I would not scream in the street. I would not beg. I would let them finish. And then I would find out exactly what they believed they had already taken from me. Before my father collapsed in the driveway 3 nights earlier, our life had been ordinary in a way that only looks meaningful after it is gone. I worked full-time as an ultrasound technician at County General, mostly night shifts because they paid a little more and because I liked the quiet. The hospital sounded different after midnight. Machines hummed instead of beeped. Voices stayed low. People told the truth more easily when they were tired. My father lived in a 1-story house in a Phoenix suburb, built sometime in the late 70s, back when people thought beige was a forever color. He had bought it after he left the service, using a loan and patience and the habit of fixing things himself. The yard was all gravel and drought-resistant plants. The garage was his real living room. He was not a talkative man. He showed affection through routine. He filled the bird feeder every morning at the same time. He sharpened the same kitchen knife once a month even though it did not need it. He kept his paperwork in labeled folders and his tools arranged by size. When I visited, he would slide a glass of water across the counter without asking if I was thirsty. Brooke had always been the louder one. She was 3 years older, confident, quick with people, the kind of woman who made strangers feel like they had known her forever. She worked in real estate, first as an assistant, then as an agent, then as something she liked to call a consultant when she wanted to sound important. She knew contracts, she knew pressure, she knew how to smile while pushing. Diane came later. My father met her after Mom died. Diane was gentle and anxious, always worried about doing the wrong thing. She forgot words sometimes. She relied on Brooke for rides, for decisions, for reassurance. Brooke liked that. I stayed out of it. I lived close enough to help, but far enough to breathe. I visited my father twice a week, sometimes more if he needed something lifted or scanned or explained. He never asked Brooke for that kind of help. Brooke never noticed. 2 weeks before his stroke, My father asked me to come by on a Sunday afternoon. He was sitting at the small table in the garage, sorting through screws into little plastic containers. The radio was on low. A baseball game, mostly static. "Sit," he said, pointing to the folding chair. I sat. He kept working. "If something happens," he said without looking up, "do not argue." I waited. That was how conversations with him worked. "Do not raise your voice," he continued. "Do not try to convince anyone. Just look at the papers." "What papers?" I asked. He finally looked at me then. His eyes were clear, calm. "The ones that matter." I wanted to ask more, but he had already turned back to the screws. That was the end of it. At the time, I thought he was just being cautious in the way older men sometimes were. I did not push. 3 days later, he collapsed. The hospital moved fast. I signed forms. Brooke arrived late and took over conversations without asking. Diane cried and apologized for things no one blamed her for. I focused on numbers and times and consent boxes. When the doctor told us there was nothing more they could do, Brooke made a sound that sounded practiced. Diane fainted. I did not cry then either. I felt hollow. Useful. I was the one who knew where my father kept his insurance information. I was the one who knew which funeral home he would have hated the least. I thought that would count for something. After I left the neighborhood that morning and decided to let them finish, I drove to work. I had not slept, but I needed the routine. The hospital smelled the same. The floors were polished. The waiting room television was too loud. During my break, I sat in my car and made a list on the back of an old receipt. What I knew, what I did not know, what I needed. Under what I knew, I wrote, new lock, moving truck, signed papers. Under what I did not know, I wrote, what papers, who signed when. Under what I needed, I wrote only one thing, time. That afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was Diane. Her voice was thin, shaking. "Harper," she said, "your sister says you are very upset." "I am fine," I said. "She says you came by and scared her." I closed my eyes. I did not knock. There was a pause. "She says you yelled." I did not. Another pause. I could hear a television in the background, a daytime game show. "I signed something," Diane said quietly. "Brooke said it was to help." "When?" I asked. "Yesterday morning. Or maybe the day before. I am not sure. I was very tired." "What did you sign?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She hesitated. "I do not remember exactly." "Everyone." That was enough. I told her I loved her. I told her to rest. I did not ask anything else. When I hung up, my hand was shaking for the first time all day. That evening, I drove past the house again, slowly. The moving truck was gone. The driveway was empty. The lights inside were off. It looked like a place that had already been decided. I parked farther down and walked past as if I were just another neighbor. The garage door was closed. There were no curtains in the front windows anymore. I noticed the mailbox. The flag was up, even though there was no mail inside. Someone had raised it and forgotten to lower it again. It was a small thing, but my father never forgot small things. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and started where I always did when I did not know what else to do. I looked for patterns. Brooke had always talked too early when she thought she was winning. She liked to explain. She liked to feel in control of the story. She also liked shortcuts. I searched for the name of the locksmith in the neighborhood. There were only 2 within 5 miles. One had a website with photos of new deadbolts. The other did not. I made a note. Then I thought about the garage. The metal toolbox my father kept there was not valuable in a way you could sell quickly. It was heavy, awkward, full of things that only mattered to him. But inside it, taped to the underside of the lid, he kept copies of documents he did not trust anywhere else. I knew that because once, years ago, I had cut my finger badly while helping him. He had opened the box to get a first aid kit, and I had seen the envelope tucked there by accident. He had noticed me noticing and closed it without comment. That night, I slept for 4 hours. When I woke up, the first thing I did was text Brooke. "I am not going to fight you," I wrote. I just want a few of Dad's personal things from the garage when things settle." It took her 3 minutes to reply. "We will see," she wrote. "Right now, you should give everyone space." I set the phone down and smiled, just slightly. Because for the first time since my father died, I knew exactly where to start. The third night after my father's death, I went back to the hospital, even though I no longer had any reason to be there. My badge still worked on the staff entrance, and no one questioned me when I walked past the security desk. I told myself I was picking up an extra shift. That was easier than admitting I needed a place where things made sense. In the imaging wing, time followed rules. Orders came in, exams were performed, results were saved and sent. No one could smile something into existence or erase a fact by speaking louder than someone else. I stayed late, finishing paperwork I could have left for the morning just to keep my hands busy. Around 2:40 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail from an unknown number. I listened to it in the break room, standing by the sink, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. "Harper," my father's voice said. I froze. The message was short, distorted at the edges, like it had been recorded on an old phone. He sounded tired, but calm, the way he always sounded when he had already decided something. "If you are hearing this, it means I did not get the chance to explain things properly. Do not panic, do not argue. Everything you need is written down. Look where I worked with my hands, not where I slept. And whatever they say about you, remember this: I chose you." The message ended. I stood there for a long time with my phone pressed to my ear, even after the screen went dark. He had never said anything like that to me before. Not directly. My father was not a man who explained himself unless he had to. I saved the voicemail and backed it up twice before leaving the room. The next morning, I took a personal day and drove to the county records office downtown. The building was beige and windowless, like it was designed to forget people on purpose. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and toner. I took a number and waited, watching a screen blink through other people's problems. When my turn came, I asked for copies of any recent filings connected to my father's address. The clerk typed without looking at me, fingers moving fast. Her face changed slightly. "There was a transfer initiated," she said, "pending." "When?" I asked. "Yesterday afternoon." I nodded. "Can I see it?" Ask sighed. She hesitated, then printed a summary page and slid it across the counter. The buyer name was an LLC I did not recognize. The seller line listed Diane Lane, acting under power of attorney. I thanked her and stepped aside. Outside, the sun was already high, baking the sidewalk. I sat on a low concrete wall and read the page again. Pending meant not finished. Pending meant time. I drove past the house again, this time closer, slower. There were no movers now, just Brooke's car in the driveway. I did not stop. Instead, I parked at the end of the street and walked back, pretending to check my phone as I passed each house. 2 doors down, Mrs. Alvarez was watering her gravel yard with a hose, the water darkening the stones. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I replied. She tilted her head. "You are Ed's daughter, right?" "Yes. I am sorry about your dad," she said. "He fixed my fence for free last year." "Thank you. I want of it." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There was a lot of activity at the house yesterday, people in and out, papers." I nodded. "Did you happen to see a man with a briefcase?" She frowned. "Yes. White shirt, no tie. Came around 10, left before lunch." My heart beat once, hard. "Do you have one of those door cameras?" I asked. She smiled faintly. My son insisted. I did not rush her. I did not explain everything. I just told her my father had warned me to pay attention to details. She went inside and came back with her phone. We stood in the sun and watched the footage together. There it was. The man, the briefcase, the timestamp, at 10:12 a.m. He walked up the driveway. At 10:47 a.m., he walked out, adjusting his sleeve, glancing at his watch. In between, Brooke came outside twice, talking on her phone. I thanked Mrs. Alvarez and asked her to send me the file. She did. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and laid everything out. The voicemail, the pending transfer, the video, Diane's confusion, Brooke's confidence. I called a lawyer whose name I had gotten from a coworker. He listened without interrupting. "Do not confront her," he said when I finished. "Not yet. I was not planning to." "Good. We move quietly. We confirm the authority. We document capacity. And we let her keep thinking she is ahead." That night, Brooke texted me again. "You should stop digging. This is getting ugly." I stared at the message for a long moment, then replied, "I am not digging," I wrote. "I am just letting things happen." There was no response. The next day, Diane called me, crying. She said Brooke had taken her phone because she was confused. She said she did not feel well. She asked if I was angry with her. I told her, no. I told her to rest. I told her I would see her soon. After the call, I drove to the house again, not to go inside, but to look at the garage door. It was shut, but I noticed fresh scratches near the handle, like something heavy had been dragged across the concrete recently. The toolbox. I sat in my car and played my father's voicemail again. "Look where I worked with my hands, not where I slept." For the first time since this began, I felt something sharp and clear cut through the exhaustion. This was no longer about the house. It was about what my sister thought she could erase. And I was done letting her decide the story without me. The funeral was scheduled for Thursday morning, 3 days after my father died, because Brooke said waiting longer would only make things harder for Diane. She said it the way people say things when they want control to sound like kindness. I did not argue. I learned very quickly that silence unsettled her more than resistance ever had. The church was small and beige, with narrow windows that let in too much Arizona light. It smelled like old hymn books and lemon cleaner. I arrived early and sat in the back row, close enough to leave without being noticed if I needed to. Brooke stood near the front with Diane, greeting people with the practiced posture she used at open houses. Her hand stayed on Diane's arm the entire time, not supportive, just possessive. People kept turning to look at me. Some nodded politely. Others avoided my eyes. I could already feel the story spreading without my participation. During the service, Brooke spoke first. She talked about how organized my father was, how prepared he liked things to be, how he had trusted her to take care of details. She did not look at me once. Diane cried softly beside her, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue Brooke had handed her. When it was my turn, I stood and said very little. I thanked people for coming. I talked about how my father fixed things instead of replacing them. I talked about how he believed if you took care of small problems early, they would not turn into disasters. I sat down before my voice could change. Afterward, there was coffee and sandwiches in the hall. Brooke moved through the room like she owned it. I stayed near the wall, listening. A woman I did not recognize whispered to another, not quietly enough, that it was a shame when money tore families apart. I held my paper cup of coffee with both hands and said nothing. When the room thinned out, Brooke approached me. Her smile did not reach her eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked. "About what?" I said. "About you coming by the house again." I did not. "You were seen." I looked at her calmly. "I live nearby." She leaned closer. "You are making Diane anxious." "I spoke to Diane yesterday," I said. She sounded confused. Brooke's jaw tightened. "She is grieving." "So am I." There was a long pause. People were watching now, pretending not to. Brooke straightened and lowered her voice. "You need to understand something," she said. "Dad trusted me. He made that clear. I thought of the voicemail. I thought of the garage." "I understand," I said. She searched my face, looking for something she could push against. She did not find it. That afternoon, after the funeral, Brooke insisted Diane go home with her instead of returning to the house. She said the empty rooms would be too much. I watched them leave together. Diane looked back at me once, her expression apologetic and unsure. I waited until the parking lot was empty before I drove away. The next morning, I went to the hospital records office before my shift. I requested copies of Diane's medication list and recent evaluations, citing family concern. The clerk glanced at the paperwork and nodded. When I read through the file later, sitting in my car, my stomach tightened. Diane had been prescribed a new sedative 2 days before she signed anything. Side effects included confusion and impaired judgment. I did not react outwardly. I just added it to the stack. That evening, Brooke called me for the first time since the funeral. Her voice was brisk. "I need you to stop," she said. "This is already settled." "What is settled?" I asked. "The house, the estate, everything." "I have not seen anything," I said. "That is not my problem." I let a few seconds pass. "I would like to pick up some of Dad's things from the garage." "No." End quote. "Just personal items," I said. "His jacket, his old tools." "You are not entitled to those," she snapped, then caught herself. "Not right now." "Why?" "They are being inventoried." "By whom?" I almost asked, but I did not. "Okay," I said instead. She exhaled sharply, like she had been holding her breath. "Good. Then we are done." After the call, I drove past the house again, just once. The garage door was open this time. Inside, the shelves were half empty. The workbench was clear. The toolbox was gone. I parked farther down the street and sat there, watching as Brooke came out carrying a cardboard box. She loaded it into her car and drove away without looking around. I waited 10 more minutes before leaving. At home, I opened my laptop and replayed the door camera footage from Mrs. Alvarez again. I zoomed in on the man with the briefcase. On his chest was a small rectangular badge, partially obscured, but the name was legible if you paused at the right moment. I wrote it down. Then I searched for public notary records in the county database. It took longer than I expected, but eventually I found him. Active license. No complaints. Yet, I forwarded everything to the lawyer. His reply came an hour later. "This is good. Very good. We need one more thing." "What?" I wrote. "A statement that shows intent. Something she says when she thinks she is safe." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The fan clicked softly as it turned. I thought about Brooke's habits, how she explained, how she justified, how she liked to feel reasonable. I picked up my phone and typed a message. "I do not want to fight," I wrote. "I just want closure. Can we talk in person?" The reply came almost immediately. "Fine. Tomorrow. Lunch." I set the phone down and closed my eyes. For the first time since the locks were changed, my hands were shaking again. Not from fear, from anticipation, because Brooke thought the story was already written. And tomorrow, she was going to read it out loud, without realizing who was listening. We met for lunch at a diner Brooke liked because it made her feel relatable. Vinyl booths, laminated menus, coffee refilled without asking. It was the kind of place where deals were framed as conversations and pressure hid behind friendliness. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a booth near the window. I set my phone face down on the table, the voice recorder already running, my lawyer's instructions clear in my head. Brooke came in wearing a light blazer and sunglasses she did not take off right away. She hugged the waitress like they were old friends. When she slid into the booth across from me, she smiled, the careful kind that measured how much softness would get the most information. "You look tired," she said. "I am," I replied. She ordered a salad and iced tea. I ordered coffee. When the waitress left, Brooke leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I want to clear the air," she said. "For Diane's sake." I nodded. "That is what I want too." She relaxed slightly. I could see it in her shoulders. She thought she had regained control. "You have always been sensitive," she said gently. "Dad worried about you." I said nothing. "He told me more than once that you struggled with boundaries," she continued, "that you took things personally." I kept my eyes on her face. I did not argue. I did not correct her. Silence invited elaboration. "The paperwork," she went on, "was done to protect Diane. You know how confused she gets. Someone had to step in." "Someone," I repeated. "Yes," Brooke said. "Me." The coffee arrived. I took a sip and burned my tongue slightly. The pain helped me stay present. "So," I said, "you have full authority now." She smiled. "I do. Even to sell the house." "Yes. Even before everything is settled." "Yes," she said again, this time with a hint of impatience. "That is what a power of attorney allows." And Dad agreed to that. I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She waved a hand. Dad trusted me. He knew I would handle things efficiently. He did not want chaos. The word efficiency hung between us. It was one of her favorites. I just want to understand, I said, because I was there when he collapsed. I was there when he died. He never mentioned any of this to me. That does not surprise me, Brooke said. You were emotional. Bian is. I nodded slowly, as if conceding the point. I am not asking for the house, I said. I am not asking for money. She tilted her head. Then what are you asking for? A few of his personal items, I said. From the garage. Things that do not matter to anyone else. Her expression flickered, just for a second. Those have already been sorted, she said. By you. Yes. And if I asked for the toolbox? I said, as casually as I could manage. Her jaw tightened. That is not available. Oh. Why? She exhaled sharply. Because it is part of the estate. Everything is part of the estate, I said. You just told me you could do whatever you wanted with it. She caught herself then. I could see it, the moment she realized she had stepped too far. I mean, she corrected, I have discretion. Right, I said. Discretion. She leaned back and crossed her arms. Harper, I am trying to be patient, but you need to accept reality. You do not have legal standing here. Dad made that clear. I felt the words hit, but I did not show it. So you can sell the house, I said, and decide who gets what, and I cannot even take his jacket. That is correct. I looked down at the table, letting the silence stretch. Brooke shifted in her seat. You are making this harder than it needs to be, she said. If you keep pushing, I will have to protect Diane from you. How? I asked softly. I can call the police, she said. You showed up uninvited. You are harassing us. There it was. The threat, spoken plainly. I looked up at her and met her eyes. If you do that, I said, what will you tell them? That you are unstable, she replied without hesitation. That you are trying to take advantage of a grieving widow. I let the words sit. Then I nodded once. Okay, I said. She blinked. Okay. Yes, I said. I understand. The waitress came back to check on us. Brooke smiled brightly and asked for more ice. When the waitress left again, Brooke leaned forward, satisfied. I am glad we talked, she said. I think this was necessary. So do I said. We finished lunch with small talk, the weather, traffic, Diane's favorite shows. Brooke paid the bill and insisted on it, a gesture she enjoyed. Outside, in the parking lot, she touched my arm lightly. Please take care of yourself, she said. This has been hard on all of us. It's conned. I watched her walk to her car, heels clicking on the pavement, posture straight, convinced she had handled everything perfectly. I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine. My hands were shaking now, but not from doubt. From the release of tension. She had said exactly what my lawyer needed her to say. Authority, sale, exclusion, threat. That afternoon, I drove to the hospital where Diane was staying temporarily for observation. I did not go inside. I sat in the parking lot and called my lawyer instead. She said it, I told him. Everything. Good, he said. We move tomorrow. The next morning, the first legal notice was filed. A petition challenging the power of attorney based on capacity. A request for an emergency injunction to halt the property transfer. Copies sent to the title company and the buyer's agent. By noon, Brooke was calling me repeatedly. I did not answer. By 3, she left a voicemail. You went too far, she said, her voice tight. You have no idea what you are doing. I listened to it once, then saved it. That evening, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. This is the title office. There appears to be an issue with the transaction. I closed my eyes and let myself breathe. Later that night, I drove past the house again. The lights were on now. Brooke's car was gone. The garage door was shut. I sat there for a long time, thinking about the toolbox, about the voicemail, about my father's voice telling me not to argue. He had been right. I had not raised my voice. I had not forced my way in. I had simply let Brooke explain herself. And in doing so, she had handed me exactly what I needed. Because this was no longer about whether she could sell the house. It was about whether she could survive telling the truth when the paperwork started asking questions she could not answer. The day after the injunction was filed, the neighborhood changed its posture toward me without anyone saying a word. Cars slowed when they passed the house. Curtains shifted. Mrs. Alvarez waved when she saw me walking, then looked quickly away, as if afraid of being counted on the wrong side of something. I understood that instinct. People like clear winners. Uncertainty makes them nervous. Brooke stopped calling. That silence told me more than any message could have. When she believed pressure would work, she used it. When it did not, she regrouped. I spent that morning doing things that did not look like revenge. I went to work, I scanned patients, I labeled files, I smiled at the security guard. At lunch, I ate a sandwich at my desk and reread the injunction documents until the language stopped feeling foreign. Words like capacity, undue influence, temporary restraint, they were blunt tools. But they were tools that worked. At 3:16 p.m., my lawyer called. The title company acknowledged the notice, he said. The transaction is frozen. Does she know? I asked. She will, he said, if she does not already. That night, I drove past the house again, but this time I did not stop. I circled the block slowly, once, just to see what had changed. A light was on in the living room. The mailbox flag was still up. The garage door was closed. At home, I opened the folder where I had started collecting copies of everything. The voicemail transcript, the door camera footage, Diane's medication list, Brooke's texts. I labeled each section carefully. My father would have approved of that part at least. What I did not have yet was the toolbox. The next morning, I went to see Diane. She was staying in a short-term care facility on the other side of town, the kind with beige walls and motivational posters that talked about healing like it was a group project. Brooke had arranged it, framing it as temporary help. I signed in at the desk and waited. When Diane was brought out in a wheelchair, she looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was pulled back too tightly. She smiled when she saw me, then frowned, as if unsure if smiling was allowed. "Harper," she said. "You came." "I told you I would," I said. She reached for my hand. Her grip was weak but deliberate. "They say you are angry," she whispered. "I am careful," I said. "There is a difference." She nodded, then leaned closer. "Brooke says you want the house." "I want the truth," I said. Diane looked down at her hands. "I signed papers," she said. "I thought they were about bills. She said your father wanted it done quickly." "Did anyone explain them to you?" I asked. She shook her head. I was tired. I did not push. I told her I loved her. I told her I would visit again. When I stood to leave, she touched my sleeve. "There was a box," she said. "From the garage. Brooke took it. She was upset about it. It's not breast." My chest tightened. "Did she say why?" "She said it would confuse you." That night, Brooke finally texted me. "We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "About what?" "About fixing this." "What is broken?" I asked. There was no reply. The next step came from an unexpected direction. Mrs. Alvarez knocked on my apartment door 2 days later, holding a grocery bag. "I was cleaning my phone," she said. I found another clip. Inside the bag was her phone, screen already lit. The video showed Brooke loading a large metal box into the trunk of her car. The timestamp was the morning after my father collapsed. "Thank you," I said. She waved it off. "Your dad would want you to have it." I forwarded the video to my lawyer immediately. "That helps," he said. "It shows removal of personal property before authority was settled." That afternoon, I received a formal notice. Brooke had filed a response. She claimed Diane was fully competent. She claimed I was interfering. She claimed I had no standing. She also made one mistake. She listed the contents of the garage as inventoried, including a metal toolbox containing documents of no monetary value. She had acknowledged its existence. I smiled for the first time in days. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, the injunction held. The house could not be sold. The buyer grew impatient. The title company grew cautious. Pressure shifted direction. On Sunday morning, Brooke showed up at my apartment without warning. I did not invite her in. We stood in the hallway. "You are enjoying this," she said. "No," I replied. "I am enduring it." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "You always did think you were better than me." "That is not true." "You think because you stayed quiet, you are righteous?" she said. "Dad trusted me. Not you." I looked at her steadily. "Then why are you here?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. "Give me the toolbox," I said. She stiffened. "No." "Then we let the court ask where it went." She stepped closer. "You have no idea what is inside that box." "I know exactly what is inside," I said, "because Dad told me where to look." Her face changed then. Just a flicker. Fear, quickly masked. "This ends badly for you," she said. "For someone," I corrected. She turned and walked away without another word. That night, I listened to my father's voicemail again, lying on my couch, the lights off. Look where I worked with my hands, not where I slept. I understood now. The toolbox mattered not because of what it was worth, but because of what it proved. Planning, intent, choice. Brooke thought she was erasing me by moving faster than grief. What she did not understand was that my father had built something slower, and I was finally close enough to see its shape. The hearing was set for Tuesday morning, which gave me 5 days of waiting and 1 night of very little sleep. I did not fill that time with panic. I filled it with structure. I went to work. I cooked simple meals. I cleaned my apartment until every surface reflected light the way my father liked things to reflect light. Order did not make the fear go away, but it kept it from spreading. On Monday afternoon, my lawyer called and asked me to come by his office. He had that tone he used when something was both good and complicated. "We received supplemental documents," he said once I was seated across from him. "From Brooke's attorney." "What kind?" I asked. "She is leaning into the argument that you are not a legal heir." I felt my stomach tighten. "Because I was adopted." He nodded. "She is claiming Dad never formalized certain things." "That is not true," I said automatically. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe not. What matters is what we can prove." I bowed. I thought of the voicemail. I thought of the toolbox. "She is also claiming," he continued, "that your father intended the house to be liquidated quickly to avoid conflict." I let out a quiet breath. That would be ironic. He watched me carefully. "There is something else." He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a copy of a letter Brooke's attorney had attached, not addressed to the court, addressed to me. For the sake of everyone involved, it may be best if Miss Lane steps back from these proceedings. I looked up. "She wants me to disappear. She wants you tired," he said. "She wants you to doubt yourself." I folded the paper once and put it in my bag. That will not work. That evening, Diane called me again. Her voice was clearer this time, steadier. "Brooke is angry," she said. "She says you are humiliating her." "I am not doing anything," I replied. "I am letting questions be asked." Diane was quiet. Then she said, "Your father kept a box." Dan. I closed my eyes. "Yes. He told me not to touch it," she continued. "He said it was not for me." "When did he say that?" I asked. "A long time ago," she said. "After he got sick the first time." My heart beat faster. "Did he say where it was?" "In the garage," she said, "under his bench." That was new. After the call ended, I drove to the house again, not to confront anyone, but to look. It was late enough that the street was quiet. I parked a block away and walked back slowly, counting my steps, feeling the ground through the soles of my shoes. The garage door was closed. The lights inside were off, but I could see through the narrow side window. The workbench was gone. Not just cleared, gone. In its place was a clean rectangle of concrete, lighter than the rest of the floor, like a shadow in reverse. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. Brooke had not just taken the toolbox, she had taken the bench. That was when it stopped feeling like a misunderstanding, or even greed. That was when it became something colder. A decision to erase. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse early and sat on a wooden bench in the hallway, my hands folded in my lap. Brooke arrived 10 minutes later with her attorney. She did not look at me. Diane was not there. That, too, was a choice. When we were called in, everything felt smaller than I expected. The room, the table, the judge's voice. It was not dramatic. It was procedural. That made it worse for Brooke, because procedure does not care how confident you sound. My lawyer spoke first. He laid out the timeline, the medication, the pending sale, the removal of personal property. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse. He let documents do the work. Brooke's attorney responded with words like intention and efficiency and family understanding. He talked about my absence, my independence, my distance. When it was Brooke's turn to speak, she did something my lawyer had warned me she might do. She turned toward me. She was never close to him, Brooke said. She did not live there. She did not know his plans. The judge raised a hand. "Speak to the court," she said calmly. Brooke flushed and continued, redirecting herself with effort. "I was the one handling things," she said. "I was the one he relied on." End quote. "Did you have power of attorney at the time you removed property from the garage?" the judge asked. "Yes," Brooke said quickly. My lawyer stood. The power of attorney was signed the day after the patient began a new sedative known to impair judgment. Brooke's attorney objected. The judge overruled. "And did you inventory the items you removed?" the judge asked. "Yes," Brooke said again. "They were not valuable." My lawyer slid the inventory list forward, including a metal toolbox and a workbench. Brooke hesitated. "Just a beat too long." "Yes," she said. "Those. Where are they now?" the judge asked. "In storage," Brooke replied. "What storage?" the judge asked. Brooke named a facility across town. My lawyer nodded. "We would like access." The judge nodded. "Granted." Brooke's face tightened, but she did not protest. She thought she had nothing to hide. That afternoon, we went to the storage facility. Brooke arrived separately, arms crossed, her confidence back in place. The manager unlocked the unit. Inside were boxes, furniture, lamps, and at the back, wrapped in a moving blanket, the metal toolbox and the workbench. My lawyer asked Brooke to step aside. He photographed everything. "Open it," he said quietly to me. I knelt and unlocked the box. The smell of oil and metal rose up, familiar and grounding. Inside were folders, neatly arranged. Not legal jargon. Plain labels in my father's handwriting. Trust instructions, letters, copies, and one envelope, thicker than the others, with my name written across it. Harper. I did not open it yet. Brooke leaned forward. "That proves nothing," she said sharply. "Those are just notes." My lawyer looked at her. "They prove intent." The manager shifted uncomfortably. Back in my car later, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a small folded document. The letter was dated 2 years earlier. He wrote about choices, about how family was not always blood, about how people showed you who they were when they thought no one was watching. He wrote one sentence that made my hands tremble. "If you are reading this, it means someone tried to take control instead of listening." The folded document was a directive. Clear, signed, notarized, naming me as the decision-maker for specific matters related to his personal effects and records. Not the house. The truth. I sat there until the sun dipped low and the parking lot lights came on. For the first time since this began, I did not feel like I was chasing something. I felt like I had been guided to it. Brooke thought she had taken everything that mattered. She had not understood that my father had already decided what was worth protecting, and he had left it exactly where he knew I would find it. I did not open the rest of the folders in the storage unit that day. I closed the toolbox, locked it again, and asked the manager to reseal the unit with a temporary court tag. Brooke watched all of this with her arms crossed, her face set in a hard line that tried to look bored. I could tell she was already rehearsing a new version of the story, one where this discovery meant nothing. On the drive home, I did not call anyone. I did not celebrate. I replayed my father's letter in my head, the careful way he had explained things without accusing anyone. He had known this moment might come. He had prepared for it in the only way he knew how, by leaving a trail of paper and patience. That night, I slept for 6 uninterrupted hours for the first time since he died. In the morning, my lawyer called with a plan, not a dramatic one, a procedural one. "We separate issues," he said. "Property versus records, estate versus intent. We do not rush the house. We make the question smaller and sharper." "What is the question?" I asked. "Whether your sister exceeded authority," he said, "and whether she knew she did." I went to work and focused on the screens in front of me. Organs, measurements, shadows that meant something if you knew how to read them. At lunch, I checked my phone and saw a message from Brooke. "We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." I stared at it for a long moment, then put the phone back in my bag. That afternoon, Diane's physician called me. "Not Brooke. Me. She has been asking for you," he said. "She is more oriented when you are present." I drove to the facility after my shift. Diane was sitting by a window, a blanket folded neatly over her knees. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. "They told me you found the box," she said. "Yes," I replied. She nodded slowly. "Your father was very particular. It's bright eye." "He was," I said. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a small folded paper. "I found this in my purse," she said. "I do not remember putting it there." It was a receipt. Storage unit rental. Dated the morning after my father collapsed. "Brooke said she was just being careful," Diane said. "She said you would be overwhelmed." I folded the receipt and put it in my pocket. "Thank you." Before I left, Diane held my hand. "Your father trusted you," she said. "I do not know why your sister is so angry." "I do," I said quietly. "She is afraid of losing control." The next filing went in 2 days later. A motion for an accounting. A request for supervision. Nothing inflammatory. Just questions that required answers under oath. Brooke's response came fast and loud. She posted on social media. A long paragraph about grief and betrayal and how money changes people. She did not name me, but everyone knew. Friends from high school commented with hearts and sympathy. A distant cousin messaged me asking what happened. I did not respond. Instead, I forwarded the post to my lawyer. "Good," he said. "That helps establish motive." By the end of the week, the buyer of the house had formally withdrawn. The title company sent a notice citing unresolved authority. The bank froze movement on accounts tied to the pending sale. Pressure shifted again. Brooke called me that night, drunk or tired or both. "You think you are winning," she said. "I am not thinking about winning," I replied. "You always do this," she said. "You act calm so everyone thinks you are right." "I am calm because I am not lying," I said. She laughed, sharp and ugly. "You think Dad loved you more." I did not answer. "He chose me," she said. "He trusted me. He trusted me with the truth," I replied. There was silence on the line. Then she hung up. The following Monday, we met again in court. This time, the judge had more documents in front of her, more questions. "Miss Lane," she said to Brooke, "why was personal property removed prior to a complete inventory?" Brooke's attorney spoke. Brooke stayed silent. "And why," the judge continued, "was a sale initiated before the cooling-off period had elapsed?" The answers came slower now, less confident. The judge listened without expression. At the end of the hearing, she ordered supervised access to the property, no removals, no changes. She also ordered Diane assigned an independent advocate. Brooke's face went pale. Outside, in the hallway, she finally lost her composure. "You planned this," she said. "You waited." "I listened," I said. "You always think you are smarter," she said. "You think because you stayed quiet, you deserve everything." "I do not deserve everything," I said. "I deserve the truth." She stared at me like she did not recognize me. Maybe she never had. That evening, I went to the house for the first time since the locks were changed, accompanied by a court officer. The door opened with a different key now. Inside, the rooms echoed. The furniture was gone. The walls bore faint outlines where pictures had hung. In the garage, The concrete rectangle where the bench had been was still lighter than the rest. I stood there for a long time, imagining my father's hands, steady and sure. The officer cleared his throat. "We have 15 minutes. If lighter." I walked through the house slowly, not taking anything, just noting. In the bedroom, the closet was empty. In the kitchen, one drawer stuck the way it always had. In the hallway, a nail still protruded where my father hung his hat. I did not cry. Back in my car, I listened to the voicemail again. "I chose you." For the first time, I understood that this was not a consolation. It was instruction. My father had not tried to keep the peace. He had tried to keep the record straight. And now, that record was in motion. Brooke still believed this was about a house, about money, about who would walk away embarrassed. She did not yet understand that the smallest things she had rushed past were the ones that would speak the loudest. And she had not yet realized that the story she told so easily was about to be asked, line by line, under oath. By the time the deposition was scheduled, Brooke had stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. Her messages shifted from polite to sharp, then disappeared altogether. Silence, I learned, was her way of regrouping when the room stopped believing her. The deposition was set for a Thursday morning in a windowless conference room that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and burnt coffee. I arrived early with my lawyer and sat at the long table, hands folded, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. Brooke arrived 10 minutes late, dressed carefully, hair smooth, posture straight. She nodded at me once, as if we were co-workers forced into the same meeting. A court reporter sat between us, fingers poised. Brooke's attorney cleared his throat. The oath was administered. Brooke swore to tell the truth. I watched her mouth form the words. I had known her my entire life. I could tell when she believed what she was saying. This was not one of those moments. The questions started gently. Name, occupation, relationship to the deceased. Brooke answered easily, confidently, settling into the rhythm she liked. This was familiar territory for her. Talking had always been her strength. Then the questions narrowed. "On what date did you first contact a realtor regarding the sale of the property?" my lawyer asked. Brooke glanced at her attorney, then answered. "After my father passed." "Can you be more specific?" my lawyer said. She named a date. 2 days after the death. My lawyer slid a document across the table. "This email was sent from your account 3 hours before the death was pronounced. Can you explain that?" Brooke's eyes flickered. I was being proactive. "Proactive about selling property you did not yet control," my lawyer said evenly. Her attorney objected. The objection was noted. "Did you remove personal property from the garage before the power of attorney was executed?" my lawyer asked. "No," Brooke said quickly. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Yes." He slid another document forward. A still image from Mrs. Alvarez's camera footage. Brooke carrying the metal toolbox. Brooke leaned back. "That was for safekeeping." "Before you had authority," my lawyer said. "I had implied authority," Brooke replied. "Implied by whom?" he asked. "My father," she said. "Is there documentation of that?" he asked. She hesitated. "Not written." The room felt smaller then. The questions continued. The sedative prescription. Diane's confusion. The inventory list Brooke herself had submitted. Each answer required more explanation than the last. Each explanation created a new inconsistency. When asked about the workbench, Brooke grew visibly irritated. "It was old," she said. "It had no value." "Then why remove it?" my lawyer asked. She crossed her arms. "Because it was in the way." "In the way of what?" he asked. She did not answer immediately. The pause stretched. "Of efficiency," she said finally. I felt something settle in my chest at that word. It was the same one she had used at the diner. The same one she hid behind. After 2 hours, the deposition ended. Brooke stood quickly, gathering her things, jaw tight. She did not look at me as she left. Outside, my lawyer exhaled. She did not do well. To another. That afternoon, the court ordered expanded discovery. Bank records, phone logs, storage receipts. Brooke's attorney requested time. Time was no longer on her side. 2 days later, Diane's independent advocate submitted a report. It detailed confusion, reliance, and a pattern of deference to Brooke's direction. It did not accuse. It documented. Brooke called me that night. "I will give you the toolbox," she said. "If you drop everything else." "No," I said. "You are ruining my life," she said. "I am letting the truth exist," I replied. "You never cared about Dad like I did," she said, voice cracking now. "I was there." "So was I," I said. "That is not the same," she snapped. "You left." "I came back," I said. "Every time he needed me." She was quiet for a long moment. "You think you are better because you waited," she said finally. "I waited because he asked me to," I replied. She hung up. The following week, we received the bank records. They showed a pattern I had expected but still found difficult to read. Payments to the realtor, deposits tied to the pending sale. A transfer from an account in my father's name to one Brooke controlled, dated the same day the power of attorney was signed. My lawyer looked at me. "This changes things." "How?" I asked. "It suggests self-dealing," he said. "That moves us out of gray territory." A formal complaint was filed. That same afternoon, Brooke's attorney requested a private settlement meeting. We met in a neutral office downtown. Brooke arrived, subdued, eyes tired, confidence frayed at the edges. She did not smile this time. "I am willing to step back," she said. "I will return the items. I will withdraw from the sale." "And the money?" my lawyer asked. Brooke looked at the floor. "I can return it." I watched her carefully, not with satisfaction, with clarity. "And Diane," I said. "She gets an independent guardian." Brooke nodded once. "And you acknowledge," my lawyer added, "that you exceeded your authority." Brooke closed her eyes. "Yes." The agreement was drafted quickly, signatures placed carefully, pens clicked softly. When it was done, Brooke stood, shoulders slumped. "This did not have to be like this," she said to me. I met her gaze. "It did, because you would not stop." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Outside, the city hummed. Traffic, heat, ordinary life continuing. That evening, I went back to the storage unit with the court officer. The toolbox was returned to me, officially this time. I loaded it into my trunk and drove home, hands steady on the wheel. At home, I carried it inside and set it on the floor of my living room. I did not open it right away. I made dinner. I ate slowly. I washed the dishes. When I finally knelt and opened the box, the folders were exactly as I had left them. At the bottom, beneath everything else, was one final envelope I had not noticed before. No label, no date. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Not legal. Not notarized. Just my father's handwriting. "If you are reading this after the fighting has stopped, then you did exactly what I hoped you would. You did not shout. You did not beg. You did not become someone else just to be heard." I sat on the floor with the letter in my hands and felt something loosen inside me. This had never been about winning a case. It had been about refusing to be erased. And the person who had taught me how to do that had known, all along, exactly who would try. The house did not feel like a victory when I walked back into it alone for the first time. It felt like a pause. The locks had been changed again, this time by order of the court, neutral and temporary. The front door opened with a quiet click that echoed through the empty rooms. Sunlight fell across the floor in long, rectangular shapes, highlighting where furniture used to be. Dust hung in the air, undisturbed. I stood in the entryway for a moment, keys still in my hand, and listened. The house made small sounds as it settled. Pipes ticking, wood expanding, familiar noises that did not recognize what had happened. I did not bring boxes. I did not bring plans. I walked through slowly, room by room, not touching anything. In the living room, faint outlines marked where pictures had hung. In the hallway, the carpet was lighter, where the runner used to be. In my father's bedroom, the closet doors stood open, empty, like someone had already made a decision about what mattered. The garage was the hardest. The concrete still held the pale rectangle where the workbench had stood. The smell of oil was faint now, almost gone. I crouched and pressed my palm flat against the floor, grounding myself in the sensation. Cool, solid, real. I sat there until my phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. "The settlement is filed," he said. "Your sister signed the acknowledgement. Is it over?" I asked. "The legal part," he said. "Yes." I thanked him and hung up. That afternoon, Diane's guardian called to tell me she had been moved to a smaller, quieter facility closer to my apartment. She asked if I would visit. I said yes. When I arrived, Diane was sitting by a window, knitting slowly, her hands more certain than they had been weeks earlier. "They say things are calmer now," she said. "They are," I replied. She looked at me for a long moment. "I am sorry." "I know," I said. And I meant it. She reached for my hand. "Your father loved you very much." "I know," I said again. We did not talk about Brooke. There was nothing left to say that would make it cleaner. In the days that followed, the house remained empty while paperwork moved at its own pace. The estate would take time. Repairs would need to be made. Decisions would come later. For now, the quiet was enough. Brooke did not call. I heard from a cousin that she had taken a leave of absence from work. Someone else mentioned she was thinking of moving. The information drifted to me like background noise. It did not land. One evening, after work, I brought the toolbox back to the house. I set it in the garage where it belonged, aligned carefully with the outline on the floor. I opened it and took out the folders, spreading them on the workbench that no longer existed. Trust instructions. Letters. Copies of documents that mattered because they told a story, not because they held power. At the bottom of the box was a smaller envelope I had not opened yet. It was heavier than paper alone. Inside was a thin folder and a photograph. The photograph showed my father standing in front of this house, younger than I remembered him, one arm around a girl with messy hair and scraped knees. Me. I was maybe 10 years old. The photo was dated in pencil on the back, the year he became my legal guardian. The folder contained adoption papers. Copies, neatly arranged, finalized, signed, official. I sat back on my heels and stared at them. Brooke's accusation echoed in my mind. "You are not really his." The truth sat quietly in my hands. I had been chosen. I understood then why my father had separated certain things, why he had left some decisions informal, personal. He had known how people could twist documents. He had trusted that I would recognize the difference between authority and intention. I packed the papers carefully and locked the toolbox again. That night, I slept in the house for the first time since everything began. I laid a mattress on the floor of my old bedroom and opened the window. The air smelled like dust and creosote. Somewhere outside, a bird made a sharp, lonely sound. I did not dream. The next morning, I woke early and made coffee in the empty kitchen. The sound of the machine filled the space, temporary and grounding. I drank it standing by the counter, watching light creep across the floor. I thought about my father's voice on the voicemail. "Do not argue. Look at the papers." I thought about Brooke's certainty, her speed, her need to control the ending before anyone else could speak. I realized then that the twist she never saw coming was not legal. It was moral. She believed family was something you could manage. Assign. Liquidate. My father believed family was something you chose, again and again, even when it was quiet, even when no one was watching. I had not won because I was patient. I had won because I had not agreed to disappear. Later that day, I returned to work. A patient thanked me for explaining something clearly. A coworker asked if I was okay. I said yes. For the first time, it felt true. That evening, I went back to the house and replaced the mailbox flag. I fixed the loose hinge on the gate. I set the toolbox back under the outline of the bench and placed my father's letter inside it. When I locked the garage and turned off the lights, the space felt complete, even without furniture. This was not the end of the story, but it was the moment where everything I thought I understood about loyalty, inheritance, and strength finally aligned. And from here on, whatever came next would be chosen deliberately, not taken by force. The weeks after the settlement moved at a slower pace, the kind that makes you notice how tired you really are once the adrenaline fades. I did not rush to furnish the house. I did not invite people over. I let the rooms stay mostly empty, as if they needed time to remember themselves. Every morning before work, I walked through the house once, barefoot, checking nothing in particular. The floors were cool. The walls held heat from the day before. In the garage, the toolbox sat exactly where I had placed it. I did not open it again. Knowing it was there was enough. Diane's condition stabilized. Her guardian called me twice a week with updates. She was eating better. She slept through the night more often. She asked about my father less, which the doctor said was a sign of healing, not forgetting. When I visited, we talked about small things: the weather, a television show she liked, the plants outside her window. One afternoon, as I was leaving the facility, she stopped me at the door. "Harper," she said, her voice firmer than I expected, "you do not have to come every time." "I want to," I said. She nodded, then added, "Your sister will not." The words were not cruel. They were simply observed. I did not respond. There was nothing to correct. Brooke's absence became its own kind of presence. Her name still appeared on documents I had to sign off on. Her signature remained on forms I reviewed with the estate attorney. But she stayed out of my daily life. No messages, no appearances. It was as if she had stepped out of the frame and left the rest of us to deal with the consequences of her certainty. At work, I took on extra shifts without thinking about it. The routine steadied me. Patients came in afraid, left relieved or resigned, but always grateful for clarity. I explained what I saw on the screen in plain language. I answered questions carefully. It felt good to be useful in a way that did not require defending myself. One evening, after a late shift, I stopped by the house and sat in the garage with the door open, the desert air moving slowly through. I leaned against the wall and listened to the neighborhood settle. Somewhere nearby, someone practiced piano badly. A dog barked once, then stopped. I thought about the letter my father had left. Not the legal one, the personal one. The way he had anticipated conflict without dramatizing it. The way he had trusted that patience could outlast noise. I wondered how long he had known this might happen. The answer came unexpectedly a few days later. While sorting through one last box Brooke had returned as part of the settlement. It was a cardboard box labeled miscellaneous in her handwriting. Inside were things she had not known what to do with. Old manuals, a stack of blank envelopes, a framed photo she had never liked. At the bottom of the box was a small spiral notebook. My father's. I sat on the floor and opened it. The entries were short: dates, notes, reminders, the kind of things he wrote to himself, not for anyone else. Change filter. Call insurance. Ask Harper about schedule. Then, further back, Brooke angry again. Talk later. Do not rush. I closed the notebook and held it against my chest. Not tightly, just enough to feel its weight. He had seen it, the tension, the impatience, the need to control outcomes before they became uncomfortable. He had not confronted it head-on. He had documented it, quietly, in his own way. That was when I realized the deepest part of the twist was not that I had been chosen. It was that he had refused to force anyone else to be different. He had not tried to change Brooke. He had simply prepared for her. A few days later, my lawyer called to confirm the final release documents had been processed. "You are officially done," he said. "Thank you," I replied. "You handled this better than most people," he added. "Most people want to punish. I did not," I said. I wanted it to stop. After the call, I sat on the front steps of the house and watched the light fade. A neighbor walked by and waved. I waved back. That felt new. Later that night, I opened the toolbox one last time and took out my father's letter. I read it slowly, not because I needed the words, but because I wanted to hear his voice in my head again. He had not asked me to forgive. He had not asked me to reconcile. He had asked me to stay myself. That was the part Brooke never understood. She thought the worst outcome was losing property, losing standing, losing face. She never considered that the real loss was something quieter: trust. I did not feel triumphant thinking that. I felt tired, sad, relieved. The next morning, I drove to work and past the diner where Brooke and I had met weeks earlier. The parking lot was full. People were eating breakfast, arguing gently, laughing over coffee. Life continued without commentary. I realized then that the story I had been living was already shrinking into the past. It would never disappear, but it would no longer define every step I took. When my shift ended, I went home and cooked dinner in the empty kitchen. I ate at the counter, standing up, because I still had not bought a table. I washed the dishes and dried them carefully, the way my father had taught me. As I turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the dark window. I looked older, quieter, more certain. I had not rebuilt anything yet, but I had protected what mattered. And for the first time since the morning the locks had changed, I felt something close to peace. I did not sell the house. That decision surprised people who eventually learned the outline of what had happened. Friends at work assumed I would cash out and start fresh somewhere else. A cousin suggested the market was still good enough to walk away clean. Even my lawyer asked, once, if I wanted him to connect me with a realtor who could handle things discreetly. I told them all the same thing. Not yet. The house was not a prize. It was a record. On a Saturday morning, a few weeks after everything was finalized, I drove to a hardware store and bought lumber, bolts, and a simple workbench kit. Nothing fancy, just solid pieces and clear instructions. I loaded it into my car and drove home, feeling oddly nervous, like I was about to attempt something I had not earned. In the garage, I laid the pieces out on the floor where the old bench had stood. I worked slowly, measuring twice, tightening each bolt by hand before using the wrench. Sweat ran down my back. My hands ached. When I finished, the bench stood straight and steady, not perfect, but honest. I set the toolbox on top of it. Then I sat on the concrete floor and let myself breathe. That afternoon, I finally opened the last folder my father had left, the one marked simply Notes. Inside were small, unremarkable things. A list of repairs he had planned but never finished. The name of a neighbor's dog. A reminder to buy birdseed. Tucked between 2 pages was a single sheet of lined paper, folded once. It was not legal. It was not formal. It was addressed to no one in particular. He wrote that he had learned, late in life, that trying to keep everyone happy only delayed the truth. That he had once believed being fair meant dividing things evenly, until he realized fairness had more to do with responsibility than symmetry. He wrote that he did not regret how things turned out, only that he would not be there to explain them. At the bottom, he wrote one last line. If you ever wonder whether you did the right thing, remember this: silence can be strength when it refuses to lie. I folded the paper and placed it back in the folder. Later that evening, Diane called me. She sounded calm, settled in a way she had not before. I am moving into a smaller place next month, she said. Closer to my sister. End quote. That sounds good, I replied. I wanted to tell you, she added, that I do not blame you. I know, I said. She paused. Your sister is still angry. I know, I said again. I wish it had been different, she said quietly. So do I replied. And I meant that too. After the call, I sat on the front porch and watched the sky darken. The heat eased. A breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere down the street, someone laughed. I thought about Brooke. Not with satisfaction, not with resentment, with clarity. She had believed power came from moving first, from speaking loudest, from controlling the narrative before anyone else could question it. She had mistaken speed for authority and possession for legitimacy. When those things failed her, she had nothing left to stand on. I had not beaten her by being smarter or stronger. I had simply refused to agree to a version of events that erased me. That was the twist she never saw coming. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not even punishment, just refusal. In the weeks that followed, life resumed its ordinary shape. I worked, I slept, I fixed small things around the house, a loose cabinet hinge, a leaky faucet. I planted something in the yard that required very little water and even less attention. One morning, as I was leaving for work, I noticed the mailbox flag was still up. I lowered it and smiled at the smallness of the act. Some habits stayed. I never heard from Brooke again. Not directly. A mutual acquaintance mentioned she had moved out of state. Someone else said she told people she had been misunderstood. The words no longer mattered to me. Stories drift until they find a place to land. I did not need to chase them. On the anniversary of my father's death, I took the day off and stayed home. I made coffee and drank it in the garage, sitting on a folding chair, the toolbox open beside me. I did not look for anything. I just sat there, listening. I realized then that the justice in all of this had been quiet by design. No courtroom speech, no public reckoning, no dramatic apology, just alignment. What was taken was returned. What was twisted was straightened. What was almost erased was preserved. And what was broken did not have to be rebuilt exactly as it was. That evening, I locked the garage, turned off the lights, and stood in the doorway for a moment longer than necessary. I felt the weight of the key in my hand, familiar now, earned. I closed the door and walked into the house. For the first time, it did not feel like something I was guarding. It felt like something I had chosen to keep.